unexpected at the UN. Nikki Haley sends shockwaves with her surprise resignation as U.S. ambassador. Please be seated. Judge Brett Kavanaugh, a lifelong Catholic, takes his place on the Supreme Court. We're inside the room for his first day on the job. North Korea. Pope Francis may receive an invitation to visit an officially atheist country. We have reaction from the Vatican. And kicking it forward. The boys' soccer team trapped in a cave in Thailand is back in the news. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 9th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump is losing a member of his cabinet. Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, says she's resigning after giving the job everything she's got. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Haley joined President Trump in the Oval Office today, where she made it clear she is leaving on good terms. President Trump says Haley notified him about 6 months ago that she wanted to take time off at the end of this year. President Trump arranged an Oval Office meeting today to say thank you.
Nikki Haley, ambassador to the United Nations, has been very special to me. She's done an incredible job. She's a fantastic person.
It has been an honor of a lifetime.
Haley didn't say what's next on her agenda, but she quickly extinguished one rumor.
For all of you that are going to ask about 2020, no, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one.
Before her UN post, Nikki Haley spent 6 years as the Republican governor of South Carolina. She says she believes in term limits.
There's no personal reasons. I think that it's just very important for government officials to understand when it's time to step aside. And I have given everything I've got these last 8 years.
We've done a fantastic job together. We've solved a lot of problems.
Nikki Haley touted U.S. foreign policy wins over the last 2 years, from working toward North Korea denuclearization to moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. That decision was opposed by more than 100 countries in a 2017 vote at the United Nations. At the time, Haley lashed out.
This vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered.
Haley's unexpected exit differs from others. No firing by tweet or forced resignation. It ended with a handshake.
On behalf of the country, I want to thank you for a great job. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you
very much.
Haley calls her return to the private sector a step up from government service, although she'll keep her current job until President Trump can install her replacement. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Justice Brett Kavanaugh takes his seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. He dives right into his new job and promises to be a team player after a confirmation process filled with tension and bitterness. Correspondent Jason Calvi was inside the courtroom to witness the newest justice's first time on the bench. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Chief Justice John Roberts welcomed Justice Kavanaugh and wished him a long and happy career. The newest justice asked several questions during oral arguments. There was smiling and laughter inside the court, but here outside, Kavanaugh's critics are still angry.
Who's for our court?
Protesters are still out, even though they couldn't stop Brett Kavanaugh from getting confirmed. Police today took the rare step of barricading the Supreme Court, hours after President Trump hosted a ceremonial swearing-in.
So help me God.
Brett Kavanaugh replaces Justice Anthony Kennedy, the person he once clerked for. Kennedy was often the swing vote, deciding high-profile cases on marriage and abortion. Kavanaugh could tilt the court conservative for decades. But a former Kavanaugh clerk has a warning for Americans trying to predict his rulings.
There's just no way of saying in advance what Justice Kavanaugh or any of the justices are going to be doing on any particular issue like that. The complexities are just too great.
Pro-life leaders were there when Kavanaugh was sworn in.
To tell you the truth, I think there's been a lot of fear-mongering going on about Roe v. Wade and all of this, but what I do believe is that Justice Kavanaugh is a good justice, and I believe that he'll be faithful to the Constitution.
Last night, Kavanaugh thanked his supporters, including Catholics.
the vibrant, loyal, and tight-knit Catholic community here in the D.C. area.
And he said he got help from above.
Ashley and I are grateful for their prayers and for the prayers from the thousands and thousands of people we have heard from throughout America.
Judge Kavanaugh made history. All 4 of his clerks are women.
Clerking for Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, is an incredible experience. He is an unbelievably hard worker. He has unbelievably high standards for himself and for his law clerks.
Today's cases were about a federal 3 strikes law. It forces stricter jail time for people on their 3rd violent crime arrested for illegally having a gun. Now, the court could soon decide to pick up cases about defunding Planned Parenthood. Kansas and Louisiana's laws are both on hold. Justice Kavanaugh missed the first week, including the case of an Alabama death row inmate who has dementia and so doesn't remember his crime. Lauren?
Jason, I understand that Justice Kavanaugh has some other jobs besides hearing the country's biggest cases.
Yes, as the newest member of the court, he has 2 very important responsibilities when the justices gather privately for their private meetings. One of those is to take notes of their discussions, and the second thing is to answer the door when there's a knock.
Okay, Jason Calvi, thank you so much. Human rights experts are calling for an international investigation into the disappearance of a prominent Saudi journalist. They're worried the longtime Washington Post contributor may have been abducted or even killed for speaking out against Saudi Arabia's government. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has reaction from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is concerned about the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi native and a U.S. resident. Pompeo says officials here are in contact with their counterparts in Saudi Arabia. They're calling on the Saudi government to release as much information as possible.
This security footage from 1 week ago marks the last time anyone has seen Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi. His fiancée says the 59-year-old entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to pick up paperwork for his marriage. She says he never came out. President Erdogan of Turkey is pointing the finger at the Saudi government. He says Khashoggi was murdered inside the consulate. Saudi Arabia denies the claim. The kingdom says he left the consulate, but officials have yet to provide video evidence. Saudi Arabia says it will allow Turkish officials to inspect the building. President Trump has weighed in.
I am concerned about it. I don't like hearing about it. And hopefully that will sort itself out.
Protesters gathered outside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul are demanding answers. Human rights advocates say both Saudi Arabia and Turkey have a responsibility to clarify what happened. Officials at the United Nations agree.
This is of serious concern, this apparent enforced disappearance of Mr. Khashoggi from the consulate of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul is of serious concern.
Investigators in Turkey say Khashoggi had written columns critical of the Saudi crown prince. The United States is an ally of Saudi Arabia, but the government has a poor record on human rights and religious liberty. Dwight Bashir, with the bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, just returned from a trip to Saudi Arabia. He notes Catholics and other non-Muslims are not allowed to openly worship, for example.
Part of what I think what needs to happen here is it needs to be something that is less of a top-down implemented process and more listening to the people and reacting. Because if it's top-down, inevitably those could be temporary moves and won't be sustainable and lasting.
Dwight Bashir notes that many of the religious liberty issues in Saudi Arabia are linked to human rights concerns, like restrictions on women driving, for example. He says it's important the U.S. promote freedom in all its aspects: speech, worship, and freedom of the press. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un wants Pope Francis to visit the officially atheist country, and that's according to South Korea.
문 대통령은 10월 17일부터 18일까지
The spokesman for South Korea's president made the announcement during a briefing today. Moon Jae-in plans to convey Kim's desire for a papal visit when he travels to the Vatican next week. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, what is the Vatican saying?
Vatican spokesman Greg Burke, Lauren, told journalists today that no official invitation has been received so far, so there's no official comment on the possibility of a papal visit. However, the Vatican press office did confirm that Pope Francis will be receiving South Korea's President Moon next week in an audience here at the Vatican on October 18th. And the Vatican says that before that meeting, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's Secretary of State, will celebrate a Mass for peace on the Korean peninsula in St. Peter's Basilica. The South Korean president will attend that Mass.
Pope Francis visited South Korea in August of 2014. It was his first trip to Asia.
That's right, Lauren. On his way back from that trip, the Pope expressed hope that the divisions on the Korean peninsula would be overcome. He said the two Koreas are brothers. They speak the same language. And he also acknowledged the suffering of the division and saying the division is great, and he said he prayed it would end. Now, this reported overture now comes a few weeks just after the Vatican signed a landmark deal with Communist China, North Korea's closest ally, as we know, and it was over bishop nominations. So the accord is aimed at ending decades of tensions, Lauren.
North Korea is regarded among the worst human rights violators in the world. Freedom of religion does not exist. Catholics are treated poorly, according to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. What is the status of the Catholic Church right now in North Korea?
Lauren, North Korean Catholics are estimated to range between 800 and 3,000. Now that's compared to more than 5 million in South Korea. The Vatican's priests were expelled by North Korea long ago, and the state appointed laymen to officiate services. Now, Catholics and Christians experience great persecution for practicing their faith, and they can even face jail and even death. And if anyone is caught with a Bible, they can be thrown into prison. So the church and its members have suffered terribly, Lauren, for decades in North Korea.
Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you, Lauren.
Lawmakers in Queensland, Australia, are debating whether to expand access to abortion. The proposal would allow women to end their pregnancies up to 22 weeks. Abortion currently is illegal in the region, except if the mother's physical or mental health is in danger. Bishops in Ireland are denouncing the draft bill to legalize abortion in the Republic as, quote, an affront to conscience. The proposal would require pro-life health care professionals to provide abortion referrals. The bishops are asking lawmakers to respect the rights of doctors who object. Plenty more up on the newscast. Why Pope Francis wants the faithful to do less work, and a report from Rome on the Synod of Bishops. "60 years ago today, Pope Pius XII died. His papacy lasted 19 years, including during World War II. He was declared venerable in 2009 by Pope Benedict XVI. Pope Francis asks the faithful if they are spending too much time at work and not enough in prayer.
Lavoro tanto che sembra un'alienazione o...
At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father said true Christians are in love with Christ, and by spending time with him, we make sure our lives do not go astray. The Diocese of San Bernardino in California has released the names of 34 priests who face credible allegations of clergy abuse. In a letter, Bishop Gerald Barnes says, quote, our failure to protect children in earlier years has ultimately led us to a new awareness and an illumination of this terrible scourge on all of society. The accusations date from 1978. 6 of the priests were convicted of criminal charges. The Bishop of Owensboro, Kentucky, is also speaking out about clergy sex abuse. He says there have been 66 allegations since 1937. The diocese has spent more than $1 million on background checks and abuse prevention training. But Bishop William Medley says, quote, additional measures need to take place, especially in terms of holding our bishops accountable. And bishops are taking part in a 3-week summit at the Vatican. They are talking about the issue. The Synod on Youth has been going over the working document and has released preliminary edits today. The members are split into 14 working groups. Participants say they see the Synod as an opportunity to prepare for a meeting in February on sex abuse, and that was convened by Pope Francis. J.D. Flynn is editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency. He joins us from Rome. J.D., we are in week 2 of the Synod. What did the bishops say today about how the church should handle sex abuse?
Well, Lauren, today we got reports from the working groups, the discussion groups of bishops. And so we learned that in the discussion groups that the bishops have been having for the past few days, there's been a great deal of discussion about the importance of addressing clerical sexual abuse in the Synod document. We know already that Archbishop Charles Chaput, Archbishop Anthony Fisher, Bishop Frank Caggiano have called for an emphasis on that in the document, that Archbishop Charles Scicluna says it certainly should be included in the document, although more will come at a bishops' meeting in February. But today we learned just how many bishops from many different parts of the world think it's important that the church talk about the evil of clerical sexual abuse, the recognition that many young people have been hurt, and the hope to move forward by acting with transparency and accountability to regain their trust.
Well, before the Synod, and this is really a Synod on youth, we did hear a lot about controversial issues like reaching out to young gay Catholics. Has that come up?
A number of things have come up related to that question. In part, there's been a discussion about how the church refers to Catholics who are gay or same-sex attracted, whether using the traditional language of the church or the contemporary LGBT language used by the LGBT community would be more helpful, more pastorally appropriate. There's also been a discussion among the bishops about how to talk about families. The fact that families in a contemporary setting are perceived to come in many forms, and whether the church should discuss families in terms of a mother and father and children or in other ways. So you have bishops from different parts of the world weighing in on that question, all talking about the importance of reaching out to families, to mothers and fathers and children, all talking about reaching out to those with same-sex attraction, with compassion, respect, and sensitivity. But a lot of the discussion is about the language that's used to refer to those things and how they reflect the teachings of the church.
So now that we've had these working groups, will we continue to see that through the rest of the week? What happens next?
Thus far, the bishops have talked about the first part of the Synod's working document. It's Instrumentum Laboris. That part talks about kind of the state of young people around the world. The next section of the document will talk about pastoral initiatives for young people. So bishops will begin discussing that. What a lot of bishops have told us is that the bishops see a priority of emphasizing Scripture, the Word of God, the doctrine of the Church, in a document that they've criticized for being mostly the language of sociology and contemporary social science. So as they move forward, I think we'll hear a lot of encouragement that the document include more Scripture, more references to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, especially on some of these controversial issues.
J.D. Flynn, editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Lauren.
There's a lot more on our show tonight. Up next, our exclusive Catholic in America series examines the faithful's attitude toward immigration and why the boys' soccer team rescued from a cave in Thailand is back in the spotlight. Tonight, another look at EWTN's Catholic in America poll. With just 4 weeks before the midterm elections, the exclusive EWTN News Nightly poll by McLaughlin and Associates explores Catholics' views on key political issues. Tonight, we look at immigration. When asked how concerned Catholics are about immigration, 40% say extremely concerned, 25% say very, and 19% say they are moderately concerned. Now, the numbers for regular church-going Catholics were slightly higher, and when asked on their views on specific immigration policies, beginning with fixing the immigration system by building a wall, here's what we found out. 45% support building a wall, while 49% oppose it. We also explored policies restricting the number of immigrants allowed into the United States, and we asked whether the U.S. should tighten or ease restrictions on migrants and refugees entering the U.S. 61% support tighter restrictions. 33% oppose tighter restriction. And 48% support easing restrictions. 46% were against that idea. It looks like it goes pretty evenly there. Joining us now is Teresa Cardinal-Brown, Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Teresa, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to be here, Lauren.
Catholics we polled, as you just saw, are in favor of tightening restrictions on migrants and refugees. The Trump administration aimed to do just that, but was criticized roundly for the way that the zero tolerance program was implemented. Now we have this Inspector General report outlining the problems, and they say that they confirm that it wasn't done very well. Critics have called it a crisis of their own creation. What impact is immigration and this going to have on the midterms?
Well, it's interesting to me because immigration is always one of those issues that polls somewhere in the top 5 or 6 for people when you ask what are they most concerned about. This year it's higher. Your polls show that a lot of Catholics are concerned. National polling shows immigration may be in the 1 or 2 issues, and certainly this administration is making it an election year issue, both touting their successes, but then they run up against something like this that criticizes some of their failures.
Well, this zero tolerance policy resulted in nearly 3,000 children being separated from their parents, and the media went crazy over that. It's still hard to pin down how many exactly are separated, and so you're seeing the trickle of stories continue about it. The IG report says some central database to track them and share the information between agencies was virtually non-existent.
It was never actually created. Yeah. One of the things the IG report pointed out fairly clearly is that the government agencies charged with implementing this policy had no time to prepare, no resources given to implement it, and never considered what might happen if they were to try to reunite these people. So these disparate systems were not able to come together at the court order to reunite these families, and so everyone was playing a lot of catch-up. Well,
and DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is saying that this is the difficulty of implementing poor immigration laws. They're saying, hey, not our fault.
Well, I'd say it's a difficulty of implementing immigration laws poorly. They did a poor job of implementing this. Yes, there are problems with the immigration laws, but they also did a very poor job of implementing what the administration told them to do. And again, you can argue whether or not the policy was correct. As you mentioned, some of your Catholics polls might say that they want more restrictions, but clearly this was not the way people expected this to go.
What changes need to be made so that the system works properly?
Well, there's lots of different parts of the system. Immigration is extremely complicated, but the issue that's drawing the most attention right now is this issue of families arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. And fundamentally, our systems of processing people we catch coming across the U.S.-Mexico border were designed when 95% of the people we caught were Mexicans. They were adult males, single, and they were coming for work.
And they were seeking economic stability.
They were seeking
It wasn't families seeking amnesty.
Exactly. This is a different group of people. They are from Central America. They're not from Mexico. They can't be sent right back to Mexico. And they're asking for asylum. And our law says we have to give them the chance to ask for asylum and make their case. We also don't have the facilities to process or deal with children and families at the border. So
I saw that firsthand. I was in Texas and saw just there's chaos.
Really. Indeed. They don't have separate facilities for kids or for families or for mothers and children. It wasn't built that way. So one thing we do need to look at is just if this is the new normal at our border, if this is the flow that we can expect, then we need to rethink how we staff up, resource, and the infrastructure we have down at the border for dealing with these cases.
And one thing that they said was when Trump was elected, this was the feeling of many Border Patrol agents, it stopped it because they thought something was going to happen right away. When it didn't, the numbers came back up again. Thank you so much, Teresa Cardinal Brown, Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, the boys' soccer team rescued from a cave in Thailand is still all about saves. The Wild Boars, wearing purple, are back on the field, and not just any old pitch. They played an exhibition last weekend at the famed Estadio Monumental in Buenos Aires, site of the 1978 World Cup final. The Thailand team tied the under-13 squad from River Plate 3-3. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.